Come on, man. What happened? Look, Screencast-O-Matic gives me 15 minutes of free time. That's it. I've got to take a very, very complicated thing, Brexit, and what brought it about, and dump that very quickly on this video. Here, in essence, is what went down. Deindustrialization is the loss of a country's industrial base to cheaper labor markets. The United States has obviously gone through this. So let's take it from the perspective of Americans. The area around the Great Lakes at one point was known as the manufacturing belt. Cities like Milwaukee, Chicago, Gary, Indiana, Detroit, of course, Cleveland, Buffalo, Rochester, and Pittsburgh. After all, what is Pittsburgh's football team named? Right. Pittsburgh may not be on the lakes, but it was connected to this system. But industry always chases the biggest profit. And the biggest profit is going to come from the cheapest labor and the least amount of environmental regulation. That's what's going to happen. Beginning in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, what began to happen in the United States and in Europe as well was that those jobs began to shift. They were good, high-paying, blue-collar, secondary sector jobs. They began to move at first to South Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore. You read about them. Then eventually to China, India, Indonesia, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Mexico, Colombia, Brazil, and some other places. What could all of those places offer that Europe and the United States and Canada could not offer? Cheap labor. That was a key thing. Now, that combined with people, I will speak about the United States, Americans who wanted much more stuff. I talked about this in the beginning of the semester. If you go into an old house in the United States, the closets are small if the house has not been remodeled. Nobody builds a house anymore without gigantic closets. When I was a child, we used to park cars in garages. Now they have become our personal storage units. What's changed? Are we really significantly that much richer? Each individual person? What's happened is we want more stuff. And because of that, we have to get it from some other place. So in many ways, we did this to ourselves. We wanted gigantic walk-in closets so we could fill them with 50 pairs of shoes and 85 shirts. When I was a kid, we didn't have that. I'm serious, we did not. So what happens? The industry moves and people lose their jobs. And those people, when they lose their jobs, are not happy. When we look at the UK, remember, this was the first industrialized country on earth. The Industrial Revolution spread from them to the rest of the world. It allowed them to conquer big parts of planet Earth because they were so industrially advanced in comparison to most other countries. And at the same time, it sowed the seeds of their own destruction. Because as other countries became industrialized, there was competition for labor. Now, up until the end of World War II, to be frank, the only places in the world that were really in this game were European countries, the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and Japan. That was it. But after World War II, the game began to change. And as the jobs began to leave, people began to be unemployed. They were not happy about that. And they looked for someone to blame. I didn't say this was going to be fun. It's not fun for me to talk about either. Well, in the United States, let's see. Who is it? Mostly it's people south of the border that people like to blame. In the UK, as a result of the European Union, People from all of the countries of the European Union can move from one country to another and get jobs. When the East European countries began to join the European Union after the collapse of communism, those countries were poorer. They began to move to the West, including to the United Kingdom. Now, in the United Kingdom, this was pegged mostly on Polish immigrants. People saw Polish immigrants in the United Kingdom and began to blame them for the loss of their job. As a result of that, many people in the United Kingdom began to think, if we get out of the European Union, our jobs will all magically come back. Now, I am somewhat sympathetic to this because my family's from Buffalo. Those people lost their jobs. At the same time, my mom left and moved to California. I myself took a job in Illinois when I didn't have a job and then came back to California. If you live in a free country like this, move. Don't sit there and cry about the job not coming to you. Sometimes you have to go to the job. That's just the way it works. But I can see that if you're a 55-year-old person who works in a factory and you have a 10th grade education, and mostly you've been able to pay for a halfway decent life, you've had health care, you've had your kids, you've been able to afford a car or two, you have a mortgage, and then bang, the factory closes. And they give you a $50,000 payout, they give you health care for 6 months, and they say, good luck. What are you going to do? Be a greeter at Walmart for the rest of time? It's not the same kind of job. And those people are not happy that this has happened to them. Even though in a lot of ways, when they're shopping at Walmart and Target and places like that, they're buying products that are made in all of those countries. So, in 2016, the British decided to have a vote. The vote was whether they would remain part of the European Union or whether they would leave. I was in the airport at Heathrow 2 days before this, and I was asking people, well, what do you think is going to happen? Every person, it will never happen. And that included some people, by the way, who were immigrants to the UK. One French guy I was speaking to said, I hope it doesn't happen because I'm going to have to leave, and this is my job. 2 days later, I was in Italy and it happened. And they voted to leave. Now, it took a while for them to get out. But in 2019, it finally was completed. I want you to look at this map. The blue represents the areas in the UK that voted to stay with the European Union. The red and pink represents the places that voted to leave. Notice all of Scotland voted to stay. Half of Northern Ireland voted to stay, and that includes Belfast. If you look at London, which is the circle, you can see that London voted overwhelmingly to stay. But then you have all of these smaller towns, older cities, and rural areas, and they turned the tide. Now, I don't know whether those jobs are ever really going to come back, or whether kicking the Polish out is going to do the trick for them. But I know this. Many people in Scotland voted to remain part of the United Kingdom several years before this when they had the opportunity to secede. They certainly did not think that what was going to happen was that a few years later, they would be forced out of the European Union. And because of this, many people in Scotland are back on the wagon of, let's get out of the UK. So a country that controlled much of the world at one point may very well be whittled down to one very small part ultimately. Nevertheless, the country has some economic strengths, especially in southern England, in and around London. The reason is because of this. London is arguably not only a global center, and at one point the center of the biggest empire on earth. Not only is it the center for English speaking in a lot of ways, but it is arguably the world's banking, finance, insurance, accounting, and advertising center. Just look at those 5 things. Can you tell me what their commonality is? Look at them. Banking, finance, insurance, accounting, advertising. Yeah, that's right. There's no product. It's insane. There's no product. Basically, they're just shoving things around on computer screens, and this makes gobs of money. Well, one of the centers on planet Earth for this is London, and London is one of the biggest cities in Europe. Furthermore, it's home to, along with Frankfurt, Germany, the most important stock exchange in Europe. Then, the northeast coast of Scotland. Now, that one's a little bit weird, isn't it? Why would it be the northeast coast of Scotland? It's because under the North Sea is oil. And all of the countries that border the North Sea get that oil. That means that the UK gets it, the Netherlands gets it, Germany gets it, and the lion's share goes to Norway, which has completely transformed Norway. This oil began to really come on shore during the 1970s. It's under the bed of the seafloor. The North Sea is a very shallow body of water. Then what happens is you drill into the seafloor, you pull the oil and the natural gas up, and then you bring it in pipelines mostly to the coastline. That oil and natural gas comes onshore in the UK in Scotland. You probably heard of British Petroleum, BP, BP Arco. That is their oil company. Now, there are some long-term problems. I don't know that economics are the long-term problems. Economics is like a roller coaster, right? It goes up and down and up and down and up and down and up and down. If you happen to be the person who guesses what the next thing that's coming is, you become a gazillionaire. Bill Gates or Steve Jobs or whatever. If you can figure that thing out, you are going to be very, very wealthy. Well, my bet is the next time that big thing happens, whatever it is, clean energy maybe, who knows what it's going to be, that's probably going to come from a country that has freedom of the press, is democratic, has an open society, has a great university system. Why do I think that? Because that's almost always where it comes from. It doesn't come from dictatorships. In dictatorships, the government is afraid for you to think at all. Because if you think, you're going to think outside the box, and then that might be some finger pointing at them. So whatever the next thing is, I suspect it's going to come from a place where you have the ability to have these things, which is, of course, Europe is one of these places. But there are some endemic problems in the UK. And these are related to what's called separatism. Separatism occurs when an ethnic, linguistic, or religious group wants to leave the country they are a part of. Now, that doesn't mean that they want to get up and move. They want to carve out a piece of the country and make it their own country. This is what's going on with the Kurds that I spoke about before. And all 3 non-English components of the UK have some level of separatist movement. Wales, they're probably not going anywhere anytime soon. Scotland, they've already voted, and they would certainly vote again. And Northern Ireland or Ulster.